I have a lot of people who have been signing up for it's like a little mini email course. It's a series, I think, of 5 emails. We call it our warm up guide. And there's been lots and lots of interest, people asking questions and really interested in learning more about warming up their dogs, specifically for sport and work. And because I get this question a lot, I just wanted to make a quick little video and talk a little bit about how I would warm up my dog or my dogs before a French ring competition, which is a protection sport. Now, I'll give you some sports specific examples. Of course, if you don't do protection sports, some of this will apply, some of it might not apply, but hopefully the way that I think about the warm up will help you think about your own warming up activities for your own dog. So in French ring, if you're at a higher level, your dog literally could be in the ring competing on the trial field for up to 40, 50 minutes continuously. So they come in and they'll do the obedience, they'll be jumping, they'll do a 1 meter, 1.1 or higher. You'll have a wall they scale over, a broad jump that they jump. There's obedience, scent discrimination, protection work. And it's in the different phases, but it's not like IGP where you come in and then you leave and then later come back for the next phase. It all runs together. And when my dog enters the ring to compete, one of the first things that he has to do is to be doing these really challenging jumps. So he has to be really warmed up. And so if I have a detection dog, for example, when I do narcotics detection, I don't warm up the same way. I don't want my dog to be breathing really hard. I don't want to go too much into the warm up where he's panting a lot because that's going to affect his ability to use his nose super efficiently. So when I'm preparing something for protection sports where it's very physically demanding, intense, they come in, they have to be just prepped and ready to go. They're running at full speed, they're jumping. I want my dog to be really well warmed up. Assuming I can't take my dog off leash while I'm warming him up, some of the things that I'll do is I start gradually with just some walking and trotting, trotting my dog and doing a faster trot. I like to teach my dogs to lunge in circles like horses. And I have a video, I'll include this if you've not seen where I've lunged my dog Bachi, but I try to just get him continuously trotting. And he could even do a little canter going clockwise and counterclockwise. And I like to do that to start getting the blood flowing and warming up and getting him warmed up. Other things that I've done sometimes is I've taken a really long leash, like a 20 to 30-foot long line, and I have 2 little touch pads, and what I'll do is I'll walk and trot my dog around, and then what I like to do for protection sports is at the end of my warm up, I actually wanna do some short little sprints, a little bit of a higher intensity, because if I'm just walking and trotting my dog, and then they go into the competition ring, and all of a sudden they're running at full speed down the field, or all of a sudden they have to scale this really tall wall or jump a meter plus hurdle, doing just a little bit of trotting is not gonna be the best preparation to get him ready to do that. I want a little bit more of an intensity by the end of my warm up. So what I'll frequently do is at the end of the warm up, I'll do some short little sprints. And I'll do that either I'll have a little retrieve. So maybe I have a tug or something that I'll throw, put them in a heel position, release them, let them go retrieve it and bring it back. I'll also have 2 little touch pads where I have a really long line and I stand in the middle and I basically send him from touch pad to touch pad. So he's running between the 2. So it's not high intensity exercise, but it's more than just a trot. So these are like general warm-ups I'll use a lot no matter what sport dogs are doing if I wanna gradually increase the heart rate. The other things that I do for protection sports for French ring is it's one thing to say you have a search and rescue dog where they're working very independently versus when I go into a competition field, say in French ring, and my dog has to really respond to me and listen to my commands and he has to respond really quickly. So in addition to warming up his body, I need my dog to be very focused on me. So I need him to come in ready to be physically warmed up, but mentally he has to be focused on me. So he's listening and responding really quickly to my commands. So another thing that I do as part of my warm up is I go through a series of obedience type activities like focused healing, go from a heel to a front to a down, to a sit, back to a heel. And what I do is I just start calling out quickly these different commands. And in between when he's responding, I like to have a ball on a rope. and I do some tugging with the ball on the rope as a reward. So now I'm starting to get the body warmed up. I have him switching positions from a sit to a down to a heel position. Sit, stay, come to me. So now I'm also prepping his brain for the obedience side, but then I'm also engaging him into that tugging and playing to keep that heart rate up. Because I want to slowly build the heart rate up, but I want to keep the heart rate. I don't want it to dip down until after we're done competing. So a lot of times we'll start to warm up our dogs and then we stand around and we wait our turn to enter the ring. So when I'm doing these different kind of obedience play sessions, that's a really nice thing that I like to do. If I go out and do my warm up and he's trotting around and does short sprinting, and then I'm waiting for my turn to be called onto the field, I don't want him to get all cold. So that's another thing that I like to do is once I've warmed him up, I want to keep him warmed up until we're able to walk onto the trial field. But I have to mentally also keep him focused and be ready. So I have to mentally have him prepared and physically have him prepared. So that's where I will come in and play with some of the tugging. Of course, I don't take my rewards and tugs and all that on the competition field, but while I'm hanging out outside waiting for our turn, I'm just trying to engage him physically and mentally to keep him prepped and ready to enter the field and compete. Then also for more sports specific, he's going to be doing bite work. So I like to have a bite pillow and do some tugging and some biting on a bite pillow. Some dogs, you might actually, if you have access to a decoy, you might do a little practice session or let them go in close to the decoy and do a little bite beforehand. My dogs typically would get very ramped up and very overly stimulated when they're biting. So, some dogs you don't necessarily want to be having the decoy and doing a lot of biting of the decoy before you enter the ring. But the idea is that I'm wanting to warm up the shoulders and warm up the jaws and warm up the neck, and so doing some biting where they're biting on a tug or sleeve, something like that, not as high intensity as the competition intensity, but warming up those sport specific, those muscles that are going to be engaged in that sport. You could also, if you're doing a sport with a lot of jumping, you might do some little warm up jumps. It would not be the beginning of the warm up. This would be after you've already got the heart rate up. You start doing some walking, some trotting, maybe some short cantering, and you might want to do some lower intensity jumping. So the idea for a sport specific warm up is to try to mimic the exercises and the body movements, engage the body in the way that they would be doing in work or sport, but it's at a lower intensity level than when right out there competing. You might have some little jump movements or lower jumps. Like I said, you might give your dog a bite on an actual decoy, but depending on your dog's mental state, some dogs can't handle that right before you do an obedience session, perhaps. They should be able to, right? If they're well trained and you do well in the sport, it really shouldn't make a difference. But it's one thing to think about. It's gonna be individual on the dogs on how much you can actually do with the biting or with an actual decoy before entering the trial field. The other thing in French ring is my dogs would guard between the legs with their nose between the legs of the decoy. And when they're doing the escort and the decoy is walking, and their nose is between the legs of the decoy, the dogs will do a lot of backwards walking. So it depends if you do bite work or you do ring sport. It depends on where your dog is in relation to the decoys. Some dogs are in a heel position and they'll escort and follow the decoy in a heel position, but my dogs would actually be positioned between the legs of the decoy. So that means when the decoy is walking forwards, my dog is walking backwards. And like I said, my dogs would do a lot of backwards walking when they're doing a lot of escorting like that on the trial field in French ring. So another thing that I would do that's more of a sports specific warm up is mimicking those same movements at a lower intensity before competition. So in my warm up, I would do some backwards walking and doing that backwards walking movements with him. I might even get him between the legs and have him walk backwards and mimic that position that he does. So those were some kind of really common things that I would do. And a good thing to do would be have your warm up routine that you do for competition. It's great if you can develop that routine and also do it in your training so that your dog just gets very familiar with that routine so that you don't go on trial day and everything's different. So I would have like my general warm up that I would do for competition. And when I was training with the club and it was my turn to work my dog, I would also prepare him for my training session, just like I would be preparing him for competition. So he knows that routine and that prep is familiar, and I'm not just completely changing things the trial day. So those are things that are very common that I would do. The other thing that I would do on training sessions also is a lot of times in some of these sports, the issue with the dogs is control and having a dog in a high arousal state and having the dog still being able to really focus on you, listen to you, respond quickly to commands. So in protection sports, a lot of times when there's a decoy around, the dogs just don't think as clearly, and so I would also do my warm-up routine if I have access to a decoy or if it's my turn to work my dog. What I like to do as part of the training is to do things like my warm-up routine with my obedience, like heel, do a front, go into a down, tug with the ball. I would do that around the decoy. So I would heel around the decoy and tug and reward so that right before I do bite work, and I might just do a couple minutes with the decoy because maybe there's a bunch of dogs waiting their turn. So I would warm up my dog before it's my turn to train with the decoy. When I come onto the field, if everybody's doing bite work, I don't want to spend 20 minutes doing obedience when everybody's waiting their turn to do bite work. So I would warm up on my own, come onto the field on training day, and I would ask the decoy, "Hey, can I have another 5 minutes?" And before we do the bite work, I would just work and do some of my healing, my obedience, backwards walking, things like that, and I would do that kind of a warm up doing activities around the decoy, and I would even tell the decoy, "Take your clatter stick and make a lot of noise and call my dog." So we would do it to also to be a great way to build up distractions. So the decoy would be trying to agitate and get my dog's attention, and I'm doing all my obedience around the decoy as part of my warm-up routine and then send them in for the bite work after that. Another thing that I would do, again, to deal with the obedience, the self-control, having a decoy there and practicing the control and warming up my dog in that same environment. Another thing that I would do is I would heel around the decoy, do some obedience commands and have the dog focus on me. And then I would actually throw my ball on a rope. I would throw it for a retrieve item and I would throw it between the decoy's feet. So I would send my dog to the decoy, but my dog can't bite. I say, "Hey, go and retrieve the item." And he has to run to the decoy, pick up the ball between the decoy's feet, the ball on a rope, and bring it back to me. And so that was for my dogs who would get highly aroused with the decoy and get very distracted because biting the decoy is their favorite thing to do. And so it was a great way to do my warm up before I entered the training field. And then I could include my short sprinting and bring up that warm up to a higher level before I actually do the full bite work routine or have them running all the way down the field to go do, say, a stopped attack on the decoy and then run back down the field. So I would frequently build in my warm up routine into my actual training to help build my dog into training and listening to me and having control in a highly stimulated environment. And like I said, I might take a while to warm up my dog. So if the decoy is just going on training day and we're just going through a lot of dogs practicing bite work, I don't want to hold everybody up and use the decoy and do 15 minutes of a warm up before bite work. So if we are doing shorter sessions and before it was my turn, I would go get my dog, let him go to the bathroom, walk him, trot him. I would maybe start 15 minutes before my turn. And I would go and start my warm up on my own before I actually enter the training field. And then, like I said, a lot of people would have been bringing their dog onto the training field and would immediately start the bite work. And I wanted to ramp up my warm up and take advantage of also the opportunity to train my dog with those high distractions. We had some really nice warm up routines built into training day with the obedience and the retrieves and doing things around the decoy and all the distractions. And then that would really help on competition day when my dog's highly aroused to help, let them know you still got to listen to me. So I just wanted to share that. For me, it's a lot easier to just hop on video and I can elaborate and more quickly go into more detail than trying to write this all out in a long descriptive written text. And I wanted to just get it recorded and send to you because, like I said, there's been a lot of high interest in the warm up guide. If you're not familiar with it, I'll put a link. It's just like we call it like an email course. It's a series of emails, like 5 days in a row with tips on warming up. And I've seen there's been so much interest in that. A lot of people are interested in the warm ups. I just wanted to do a little recording and add some more examples. And I do get people asking specifically, how do you warm up your dog for on competition day? So hope that was helpful. Even if you don't do protection sports, I think you can probably grab some tidbits from this. If you have any other questions or interests, things you want to hear about, let me know. I'm always looking for more topics and things to write about, to talk about, to do podcasts and blogs and things like that. And happy to hop on another video and answer your questions. Just shoot it over to me. Thanks so much for listening.